Hey guys, I'm Dave and welcome to the Trull Gallery. Today, we're going to dress up a set of floating shelves. I was recently asked to build some floating shelves for a client, and while I've done a couple of floating shelf videos already, these will have a bit of a twist. You see, my client happens to be an attorney, and she needs a place to store a lot of 3-ring binders. That means the shelves have to be 12 inches deep and sturdy enough to hold the weight of those binders. The left side of those shelves happens to be open, so I thought we could add a built-in bookend to help keep things in place. Let's see if these turn out as well as I hope they will. This was the first cut of the design of the shelves. It seemed simple enough, but since I'm building with solid pine, the end grain will show, and that bothered me. I came up with this idea, and I think it looks much nicer, especially since this is going in an attorney's office. The mitered ends hide the end grain on both pieces. I milled up the blanks, but once I took a look at it, I realized with seasonal movement, it could tear itself apart. The shelf would move across its width, but the grain of the bookend was going in the wrong direction. And that end grain would really bother me if it was in my office. After milling up wider stock that allowed for both pieces to move together, I think I can start on that crazy joint I have in mind. I drew layout lines on both the shelf and the bookend, and then added the miter on the bottom of the bookend. If these were assembled with just glue, it would make for a very weak joint. It would basically be a weird butt joint miter thingy. To add strength, I'm going to add some dowels. I split the difference between the top of the miter and the top of the shelf stock, and drew a center line for my dowels. It may be hard to see here, but this is why I hate working with pine. There's a fairly deep gouge here, and that's just from going through the planer. Maple wouldn't do that to me. After marking the 3 locations on one of the ends, I set up my drill press with a fence, stop, and my depth stop. This will speed up the process when making multiple pieces. After drilling the first hole on all 3 ends, the stop was adjusted, and the second holes were drilled. One more adjustment, and the third hole was drilled in all 3 pieces. I was pretty sure these holes would be easier to drill now rather than after the joinery was cut. I set my table saw up with a sacrificial fence and tilted the blade to 45 degrees. After several test cuts to locate the fence and blade height accurately, I made the first cut on each shelf. With the blade still at 45 degrees, I adjusted the fence and cut the 3 bookends. After setting the blade back to 90 degrees, I added a stop block to my fence and used my crosscut sled to complete the cut on the shelf. By using the stop block, the waste can safely fall to the table without getting pinched between the blade and the fence. I clamped some stock to the side of the shelf to act as a guide and set dowel points in each of the 3 holes in the end pieces. Then I could slide the ends into place and give it a few taps with my mallet. Once I remove the end, you can now see how the dowel points gave me the location to drill the next set of holes. My drill press doesn't adapt well to such long pieces since I'm going into the end grain. I have a drill guide, but the mitered edge would get in the way. And sure, I could just drill these by eye and hope they stay straight, but a simple block with a 3/8 inch hole helps to keep my bit square to the edge. I simply line up my brad point bit to the dimple from the dowel points, hold the drill block snug to the end grain, and drill the holes. A stop collar on the bit ensures that I drill to the correct depth. There are 3 more things to do before assembly, and I remembered to do 2 of them, which is about par for me. The first is to shape the bookends. While the angle isn't critical, I drew out what looked right to me. I set that angle on my miter saw and set a stop so all 3 ends would match. Then I could set each piece in place and trim off that front corner. After sanding the inside faces of all the pieces, it was time to assemble. We'll get back to that step I missed soon. I taped off the inside faces of both pieces before adding glue to them. This is basically a miter joint glue-up, and since end grain sucks up glue, I added glue to both sides. Then I could add the dowels and clamp things together. A pair of corner clamps help hold the ends square to the face while the glue dries. Even though I taped the faces, I still wiped off any excess glue to make cleanup easier later. My dowel jig is designed to center holes in your stock, but the post and the hardware are off-centered. One edge of the post base is nearly flush with the side, while the other side has a pretty fair space. By adding a small shim, I've offset the post hole, centering the mounting plate on my stock. I can use these marks to set up for the next step. Remember I said there were 3 steps to take before gluing up my shelves? Well, this is the 3rd step. Cutting the groove in the back of the shelf to accept the mounting post. I can still cut the groove, but not as easily if I had done it before I had added that end stop. I set up my router with a straight bit, with the depth set to cut a hair deeper than the thickness of the plate. I also set the fence on the router to make a cut down the center of the shelf back. This is the first pass, and I make sure to stop the cut before it goes through the side of the bookend. Once all 3 shelves have this first cut, I adjust the fence for the second pass. By setting the fence so that I'm cutting on the far side of my groove, I ensure that any slips of the router prevent the cutter from blowing out that far side. I use the same setup to cut most of the near side of the groove. You'll notice that the bookend interferes with my router fence and leaves about 6 inches of the grooves uncut. This wouldn't have been an issue had I cut these at the correct time. One more reset on the fence and I can carefully clean up that last bit of the groove. Any wiggles here can blow at the bottom of the shelf, and luckily the only slip was a small one and will be hidden once the shelf is mounted. After staining and a few coats of urethane, the shelves were ready to install. After locating the studs and drawing level lines for the brackets, I attached them to the wall. One downside of these brackets is you only get one fastener into a stud. For the second screw, I use a hollow wall anchor. I use a story stick to locate where each post sits. I start with an 1/8 inch spacer against the wall and set a piece of stock on the posts. Then I can mark the left and right side of each post. I can then mark the center of those 2 points and use that to mark the center point on the back of the shelf. I repeat this step for each shelf just in case things aren't exactly lined up. After drilling the mounting holes with that spacer, the shelves can be slid or pushed into position and they're ready for loads of 3-ring binders. This was a nice way to clean up the end grain on those shelves. And since the shelves are right next to the office door, the bookend provides a positive stop preventing any of the binders from falling off. And it could be extra special here since it's a pocket door which could have extra vibration as it opens and closes. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this video. Was there something I could have done different, easier, smarter? Drop in the comments below. I'd love to hear. As usual, I'll add some links to some tools and equipment I use in this video and around the shop on a daily basis. Some of them have affiliate links, and should you happen to need one of those things and purchase it through the link, it does help support this channel. If you enjoyed this video, maybe give us a thumbs up and share it with friends. And if you haven't already, maybe it's time to hit that subscribe button and a little bell so you get notified each time I put out a new video. I think I know what's coming up next, but you never know, so you'll just have to wait and see. Until then, have a great day, stay safe, we'll see you soon.